So in this example, we're going to be looking at the effectiveness of KT tape. KT tape was rolled out in the Olympics several years ago, and it's gained popularity with both professional and amateur athletes. So this is one study that looked at whether or not it was actually effective or not. First thing I want you to notice is that, in fact, we are dealing with two samples. I can tell I'm dealing with two samples because I have, first of all, two groups. I have a KT group and a control group. I can also tell I'm dealing with two samples because I have two different numbers for averages. That is, I have a decrease in pain intensity of 5.14, and I also have a decrease in pain intensity of 2.75. So I've got two values in here, which tells me I have two samples. I can also tell I'm dealing with averages. The way I can tell I'm dealing with averages is I'm measuring pain intensity. Pain intensity would be a quantitative variable, and I don't have any percentages in here. So I can tell, because it's quantitative and no percentages, I'm dealing with averages. Another way to tell that is I have a standard deviation, and anytime I have standard deviation, this is an average problem. So right now, I know I'm dealing with two averages, and I want to create a confidence interval for the groups. Every confidence interval we do has 3 steps. The first step is to go ahead and list everything. Because I have two samples, I will make 2 different lists. I will make one list for my KT group and one list for my control group. The things I need to list when I'm dealing with a 2 average problem is X bar for each, N for each, S for each. Now, because I have 2 different samples, I'll go ahead and I'll label these as 1 and 2. So I have X2 bar, N2, S2, X1 bar, N1, S2, S1. Having these lists, I'm going to go ahead and fill them in. Now, it's important to realize that I didn't have to do it this way, as I could have the control group as 1 and KT as 2. Order doesn't matter. I go ahead and I'm always going to list that first group as the higher number so that when I subtract off, I get a positive value. But you don't have to do it that way. X1 bar is the average pain intensity for the KT group, which is 5.14. N1, the sample size, which is 26. And S1, the standard deviation, which is 3.81. Same thing over here. The control group had a decrease in pain intensity of 2.75. N2 is 26. S2 would be 2.55. Something to notice is that my standard deviation over here is actually almost my average, which means the standard deviation is very large. There was a lot of variation in this group. After this, I need to realize that because I'm using 2 samples, I need to go ahead and calculate the difference. I'll take X1 minus X2. When I do this, subtracting those 2 off, I'm going to go ahead and get 2.39. So X1 bar minus X2 bar, 2.39. It's a positive value because my first group's bigger than my second group. If you had reversed these, it'd be 2.39, just a negative instead. After I have that difference, the next thing I need to do is go ahead and unfortunately do the miserable part of this. I need to calculate degrees of freedom. When you run through the calculation for degrees of freedom, it's easiest to do it one little piece at a time. In this case, when you run all these values through, you should get right around 44. After I find my degrees of freedom, the next thing I'll do is go ahead and go to my T table. Inserting that in, I go to my degrees of freedom. I notice 44 is not actually on there, which means I will round down to 40, trace 40 over, 44 over, 95% up, and when I do that, I get a T-score of 2.021. Now that I have all my information listed, the next thing I need to do is my calculations. My calculation step involves only finding SC. SC in this case, because I have 2 averages, is S1 squared over N1 plus S2 squared over N2. Plugging in all my values and being kind of careful about it here, rounding to 2 decimal places, I will get 0.90. My third step is to go ahead and put together my interval. To find my interval, I'll take X1 bar minus X2 bar plus or minus T times SE. That is, I'll have 2.39 plus or minus 0.9 times 2.021. Notice in my case here, I just switched where I put T, I put here, and I put SE in the front. That's okay. Multiplication is commutative, meaning the order there doesn't matter. When I go ahead and I subtract these two values off, I'm going to get a value of 0.57 when it's rounded to 2 decimals. For the upper one, I'll go ahead and get 4.21. Final thing I want to do is interpret this. The first thing I want you guys to notice is that this interval doesn't include 0. Because it doesn't include 0, that means that I found there was in fact a difference between these two groups. That is, when I subtracted them, I got a positive, meaning KT group had a higher change in pain intensity. But even when I constructed the interval, that interval never crossed 0, meaning that I've shown, with that 95% confidence here, that yeah, it looks like there's definitely a difference between the groups. When we go to state our final answer, we're a little bit more specific about it. We always start with, we are blank % confident. Because we're talking about the difference between two, we'll say we are 95% confident, in this case, that the difference between the true averages of blank, group 1 will go in there, and blank, group 2 will go in here, for whatever we're talking about, is between our two values. So, filling this all in then. We are 95% confident that the difference between the true averages of those who use KT tape and those who don't for decreases in pain intensity is between 0.57 and 4.21.